Nets offseason article is up now on ESPN.com. Brooklyn has been swept by the Boston Celtics, the only team in these playoffs for the first round that have been swept. And as I always say, we're not going to do books on tape. This is a 3,500-word offseason article. I think I probably could have added another 2,500 words here because there is a lot to digest as far as what is going to happen in Brooklyn this offseason. I mean, there is plenty of blame to go around if we want to do the blame game. I mean, certainly people will look at the job that Steve Nash did. I give him credit. I mean, an unstable situation the last 2 years in Brooklyn. When you look at last year with Kyrie being suspended, basically it goes on a sabbatical. The Harden trade, injuries at the end of the year. This year with a part-time player in Irving, injuries to Durant, Harden trade again. I mean, the list goes on and on. They got to the playoffs. They get swept. If I'm going to be critical of Steve Nash, I'm going to probably look at games 1 and 2, especially game 1, the end of that game. Not using a timeout after the Jaylen Brown basket to set up a play, and basically they just went ISO, and the rest is history. And I thought after game 1, the Nets were cooked. I didn't think they had a chance to win this series, and I know they were up 17 in the second game, and you saw the Avalanche come through, and you saw basically them get steamrolled in game 3, and then losing a close game in game 4. So certainly we can look at the job of Steve Nash. Do I think he's going to lose his job? I don't. I mean, who in their right mind can coach this group right now? And who would want to? I mean, that's the big thing here is I know you have Durant and Irving, but I mean, the pressure to win is so high in Brooklyn based on everything they've mortgaged. I don't think Steve Nash should lose his job, and I don't think he will lose his job. And that will probably upset some Nets fans here, but I want to see, and I know it's a big if, I want to see with a full roster here as far as what he can do. You can certainly blame, put the blame on your 2 stars. Certainly Durant and Irving were basically no-shows for this series. I know Irving went for 39 in game 1 and made some ridiculous shots, but basically he was Darren Williams missing in person game 2 and game 3. Durant, that Celtic defense basically ate him up, and yeah, he played well in game 4, but basically time ran out on his team here, and you needed 4 A-plus performances by your main guys to be able to get to a game 7 here, and you got, what do you get, 1.5, maybe 2 out of 8. And then I think you can look at the Nets front office. The James Harden trade has turned into a disaster. What that trade has turned into is a player that who knows when we will ever see him on the court in Ben Simmons. And I thought at the time when Brooklyn made the trade in February that the trade was more about next year because of because of where Simmons was, hadn't played a game in June. I didn't know where he was physically wise, what impact he could have. So I always did think it was about next year, but the soap opera that was in Philadelphia has now carried over to Brooklyn, and I know mental health is a serious issue, and I think the one thing that the Nets made a big mistake at is saying that he was going to play game 4. I would have just ruled him out for the whole series and let him, it's easy to rule a player out in a series, and then I'll just say, he's ready to play game 6. He's ready to play game 7, and just go there. And I thought they basically put Steve Nash in a bad spot because he had to answer every day. When's Ben Simmons playing? What did Ben Simmons do today? Is he playing? Is he not? And the last thing the coach wants to do is when he's trying to coach a series is worry about a player that is not part of your rotation. So the Harden trade right now from both ends is a disaster. From what they gave up in Houston to not managing that player in Harden when he was here. When you do those type of trades, and trust me, I've been there. I mean, I've been part of disaster trades The goal is not for that player who you acquire or acquired, multiple players, to be gone in a year or a year and a half. And now you have Harden in Philadelphia, and Simmons, as I said, I don't know when we're going to see him here. And the one thing that I made mention in the article is that in hindsight, and we all can play Monday morning quarterback here, maybe Brooklyn should have just rolled the dice and let Harden play out the season here. I know he would probably been a pain in the ass. And then basically let Philadelphia gut their roster in the offseason to go out and create cap space to just sign Harden. Maybe that was the best, but that wasn't something at the time, and I applauded Brooklyn for being proactive here because you were going to probably lose him. But now looking back on where this team is and what happened in the playoffs, maybe in hindsight that was the best move here. So, and the other thing too is with Brooklyn, you look at the bench, and that's certainly been an Achilles here. Outside of Blake and Patty Mills in Game 3 gave him a little bit of spark. You had DeAndre Bembry, Javon Carter, James Johnson. Those guys those are guys were acquired in the offseason, weren't even on the roster when the season ended. LaMarcus Aldridge, no impact at all. There was a lot of misses. It was almost like Laker-esque misses. But fortunately, you had Durant and Irving that covered up some things at the end of the regular season, and this team was able to get in the playoffs. So there's a lot of improvement from the coaching aspect, from the players, and certainly from the front office. If they don't want to, be in this position again, if they don't want to, lose in the first round. And let's face it, I said it in a tweet. A guy in Simmons who hasn't appeared since last June, and Joe Harris, who had reconstructive ankle surgery, are basically the keys to how far this Brooklyn team can go next year. I mean, as good as Durant and Irving are, that's the reality here. And Brooklyn's got a lot of questions in the offseason. Certainly Irving is going to be the big thing as far as what you do with him. He's got a player option. I mean, let's face it, Irving's going to be back in Brooklyn. I mean, that's the nature of this business, how it goes. I mean, if you're not going to sign Kyrie Irving, you might as well just trade Kevin Durant. I understand that the market for him is not, hey, you can say, let him go test the market. Let him go to Indiana or Orlando or Detroit or one of these other places. But you're in bed with, when you went out and signed Kyrie and Kevin Durant in 2019, like that wasn't a 3-year partnership. Like, as I said, for better or worse, Irving is going to be here. It's just a matter of what the contract is going to be. I think it's going to be 4 years, $190 million, and it's going to be lined up as far as where Durant is. Because what do you want to do? Alienate Durant and say, you know what? It's you and Ben Simmons on an island. You two figure it out here. For a guy who hasn't played and Durant's going to be left with a bunch of role players, good luck. If I was Kevin Durant, I'd just ask to be traded. I mean, it's simple like that. And so, yeah, I think Irving is going to be back. And in a perfect world, I would want Kyrie Irving on a year-to-year max contract. Stephen A. said it on over the weekend. I felt like he was stealing my little plagiarism there. I'm just kidding, but I have it in the article. In a perfect world, Kyrie Irving would be back on a max contract on a year-to-year basis. I mean, that's the reality of it here. But the likelihood is that he gets a 4-year 190 and his contract aligns with Durant, and you keep your fingers crossed that Simmons comes back and that Joe Harris comes back, and that's going to be your, and you have Seth Curry, and that's your starting 5 next year. That's the reality of it. I think when you look at the rest of the roster here, and one thing I also noted too, and sorry to jump back, is like, I remember December 2020 on Christmas Day when Brooklyn went into Boston and blew their doors off. And I remember putting a tweet out there that said, like, this roster is the envy of all teams. You know how many teams would have loved to keep your core intact with Jared Allen and Karis LeVert and Spencer Dinwiddie, and then just go out and sign Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving into max cap space? Like, you know how hard that is? And after that game, I said, man, these guys this is perfect. Sean Marks in the group in Brooklyn, they did it perfect. Like, and you have all your draft picks. You can still do certain things. And then Kyrie goes AWOL. The team is 500. And they go out and do the Harden trade. And we all know it's history. All your picks are gone. You're stuck with Irving and Durant and Simmons. And this is kind of who your roster is going to be. And if you're ownership, you're thinking like, how much do I want to spend? You have a litany of free agents. Patty Mills got a player option. Andre Drummond, Bruce Brown, Claxton, Aldridge, Blake, Kessler Edwards, David Duke. I mean, and what are your resources are? You basically have Brown and Claxton have bird rights. You can bring them back and exceed the cap. I don't see Blake Griffin back. I don't see LaMarcus Aldridge back. I think Claxton will be back. I think, but God almighty, can you make free throws? Andre Drummond, I mean, I thought he was good during the regular season, exposed in the playoffs. It's like the Lakers series last year. And there's work to do, man. Like, the Nets are in the luxury tax. Like, if you bring back Claxton, Brown, use your tax mid-level, and maybe use one of your trade exceptions, you've got a bunch of them, you're going to have a $330 million payroll with salary and luxury tax. Like, you're approaching Warriors territory, and Golden State's in a repeater tax. That's why their penalty is so high. It might be the largest in NBA history here. So, man, you got a lot of work to do in the front office because you've got to build that bench. You're small. You've got no wings. You waived James Johnson for Kessler Edwards, and you didn't play him at all. You have Smurfs. You have Irving, Mills, Seth Curry, Goran Dragic, who's also a free agent. You have a small lineup, and you have bigs that are average. You don't have Jaylen Brown. You don't have Jason Tatum. You don't have 6'7", 6'8" wings. How do you go out and find them? And that's going to be the biggest challenge here, where you got to find players so your best player, Durant, is not run into the ground and playing the most minutes and is basically left on an island here. So there is a ton of work to do here. And do I think ownership will pay? I do. I think you can use the Simmons and Harris excuse, and with Durant on this roster. I mean, if Kevin Durant sees ownership basically cutting costs, basically he's just going to walk in there and has to be traded. I mean, that's the reality of it here. So there's a lot of work. It's a long off season here. The Nets have that Philadelphia pick. They have to decide by June 1st as far as what they want to do. If it was up to me, I would defer till next year and leave it unprotected. You saw with the Clipper pick, and you saw with with the Clipper pick that's owed to Oklahoma City, with Paul George getting hurt, and even this year's Nets pick that goes to Houston, a pick that you think might be in the 23, 24 range, might be in the lottery. Who knows if there's an injury to Philly? Maybe Embiid has thumb surgery in the offseason and he's out for an extended period here. But that is my 13-minute diatribe on the Brooklyn Nets, who now head into the offseason, swept from the playoffs from a Boston team that they beat in 5 games only a year ago. And there's a lot of work to do.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.